Mother notices holes in baby's nose. Doctors discover something troubling. This father received terrible news. Unfortunately, his son had died. So he buried him. But 11 days later, his cell phone rang and there was a call straight from the grave. Did his son resurrect? Did a miracle really happen? Having a child is a great responsibility. You have to bathe, feed, and change its diapers. But a parent's role doesn't end there. When children grow up, the biggest difficulties begin to appear. For one must be taught what's right and what's according to the local laws, and also through one's own personal justice. The work of caring for someone doesn't end when they come of age, quite the opposite. All parents continue to care for their children even after they leave home and build their own families. Because the struggles he had were ones that other people were unable to understand, down the drain. Frank Kerrigan was born and raised in California, and unlike other men in his family, he had a dream of becoming a father one day. And it didn't take long for him to fulfill his dream. The man married so much that he couldn't bear his own happiness when he learned that his wife was pregnant. She announced that the child would receive the same name as the father, and that made him even more excited. But on the day of the birth, they received some sad news. The couple wanted to build a big family, but unfortunately his wife had complications and was in serious condition. Frank had to take care of his wife and newborn son alone. He loved his family. He would never abandon them no matter what their situation was. A few years later, his wife died and Frank was holding her in his arms when he saw her lose her life right in front of his eyes. The man was devastated. But he couldn't afford to grieve for long because he had to take care of the only thing that remained of his love for his beloved wife, and that was his son. As the years went by, Frank noticed that there was something wrong with his son's behavior. He took him to the doctor, but the professional referred him to a psychiatrist. Frank was lost but figured something simple with effective treatment. However, his little boy was diagnosed with numerous mental disorders with no cure. But the man promised himself that he would never give up on his son and he would keep his word. He did everything and dedicated himself body and soul to the child. But adulthood came, and along with it came even more problems, such as the constant use of narcotics. An unfortunate decision. Frank was 82 years old and didn't have much strength left to fight his son's mental illness. And unfortunately, things didn't go as planned. He always felt he was a burden to his father and didn't understand how that man could love him so much even after all the struggles. One day he got up in the morning and took his medicine as usual and told his father that he would go to a park. The man agreed but felt that this farewell was different and very melancholic for someone who was only going a few blocks away. Unfortunately, he was right because his son never showed up again. Junior decided that it would be better to live on the street so he could leave his old father alone. But the young man was wrong, for Frank accepted the fact that his son would need care for his whole life and agreed to give most of his time to him just because he loved him. And for 6 months he had no news of his son. No matter how hard he looked for him, the local police didn't seem to care about someone with diagnosed mental disorders going missing. Everyone knew that Junior had problems with narcotics, so they thought it was just a matter of time. But Frank knew that it was not. His son had always been a strong person. Despite his difficulties, he always did his best to show the best side of himself. The old man's efforts were uncomfortably in vain. For Junior was living on the streets somewhere in the city and had no intention of returning home. On the other side of the line, one day Frank woke up with a bad feeling. The man had no idea what was going on, but he felt in his heart that that day would not be good, and he was right. Because just a few hours later, the old man received a phone call that really shook him. The man on the other end of the line reported that his son had been found dead on some street in the city. But no parent is prepared to lose their child in any way, for that's not the natural order of life. Frank was very upset and still didn't understand what was happening. So he asked if he could go and recognize his son's body. But he quickly replied that the man had been identified by his fingerprints and wouldn't require any family member to verify. The man fell into disrepair and began to cry. For only then did he understand what had really happened. Grief is a really hard moment, but even though he suffered, he organized a funeral for his son. Unfortunately, it had to be sealed as to not cause any trauma due to his appearance. The whole family attended. The ceremony was very important to everyone, but unfortunately, the time had come. Frank couldn't watch as they buried his son. It was very painful to him, and especially because of the way he was treated and not being able to see his face for the last time. Little did Frank know, but this story wasn't even close to its end. Inside the coffin, the man returned home alone. He'd never felt so sad before. Even his strength to cry had worn out. The first week was very hard for him. However, something terrifying was about to happen. 10 days had gone by. Frank was used to the idea that he would never see his son again. But the 11th day was waiting for a big surprise. Frank didn't want to get out of bed, but he made an effort. The man walked to the kitchen to get a glass of water when suddenly his cell phone rang. He didn't know the number, but he answered anyway. Frank was not prepared to hear what was going to happen, because when he put the phone to his ear, he thought he was going crazy. The voice on the other end of the line was clearly that of his son. How was this possible? Was Junior calling from inside the coffin? Before you know the answer, leave your like and subscribe to the channel. Junior was just crying and called his father Frank, didn't know what to do. But suddenly another voice appeared. It was a friend of the family who was walking calmly down the street when he bumped into a homeless man, and it didn't take long to find out that it was Junior, Frank's son. Nothing in this story was making sense because Junior was identified by fingerprints at the moment that it was. The meeting of the two of them was very exciting, and Junior promised to never run away from home again. After they met and made sure that it was really the man in question, they went straight to the police station. Investigators took a while, but it was discovered that they lied about the fingerprints just to hurry up with the body that matched the same description of Junior. The man who was buried by the family was actually from another state, and they had to open his grave and cremate him so that they could send his ashes to his mother. The coroner's office made a public statement apologizing for what had happened and said they were sorry for any emotional trauma caused. But words were not enough to pay for this story. The secretary and the coroner were convicted, while the owner of the place paid a large compensation to all involved. And with this money, Frank was able to get a better treatment for his son, who changed from water to wine and finally found his way. Every life is important, even the lives of people who seem to have nothing. And this should be respected because even though Junior lived on the streets for a few months, he had a very loving father who never gave up on him. See also about this baby who couldn't tell his parents about the cruel nanny, but the family dog manages and becomes a hero. Click and watch now.